Alright, we're gonna open up Adobe After Effects. And at first, it may look daunting, but don't worry. You don't need to know everything about the software. What we're gonna do first is save the project. So go to File, Save As, and title it whatever you would like, and save. Alright, let's get started. On the left is your project panel. This is where you drop in your files, where you import your files, you create compositions. So this part we'll be utilizing pretty often. On the bottom here is our timeline panel. This is where when we drop in the assets and we put it into our composition, this is where you'll see all of your assets when we put them in. And it'll tell you how long that layer is going to be. We'll go over that as well. The middle section is your compositions or slide. This is where you'll see the actual slide or scene for your video. So what we want to do now is create new composition, and a dialog box opens up. The important part is making sure that we change the width and the height. We want to have a widescreen dimensions. When you see YouTube videos, those are widescreen dimensions. We want the width to be 1920 and we want the height to be 1080. All of the rest you can just leave alone for now. You can change the background color if you like, but we'll leave it as this and click OK. Oh, before we do that, let's rename the composition to anything you like. My first composition. Click OK or push enter, and now you have your first composition created. Great, we have our composition. You can see on the project panel on the left that you have your composition here. If you need to rename it, you can always right click and click rename and rename it. On your composition panel, you can zoom in on the scene by using your mouse wheel. So we're going to click on the composition. Right now we have a blank canvas. If you use your mouse wheel to scroll up or down, you can zoom in and zoom out. Now, alright, let's go over some of the items on this top bar here. All this stuff looks pretty overwhelming. And the good thing is, you don't need to know all of these items. You only need to know a few. For example, I don't use majority of these options up there. First is the selection tool. This is where you select the items that you see on the slide or scene, just like PowerPoint. And just like PowerPoint, you have the text tool. For example, you click on it, you go to the slide, push enter, and you can start typing. Text tool. And then to exit out of the text selection, you can click the selection on the top left. Now, using your selection, you can drag it around, just like PowerPoint. On the character panel, on the right, you have the character font that you can change. For example, we can change it to anything. Maybe Bebes Noe Bold, which is a popular font. You can change the font size. Hold and drag it. Move it around. Okay, you can change the color. Just like PowerPoint, there are a lot of properties that you can do with the text tool. When you click on the text tool, you'll notice that you have these red little squares around the text box. You can click and hold and drag it around. And if you hold shift, it will be proportional. Okay. Hold and drag. If your text tool looks a little pixelated, for example, if it looks something like this, where it looks a little blurry and pixelated, that's because you have set your resolution to be less than full. Maybe it was set to a third or a quarter. I actually recommend you having it to half and not full. You can change it to full to preview it, but if you have it on full, it can, it soaks up a lot of memory and a lot of your CPU, so it might slow your computer down. So you can change the resolution here. I like to set it to half or maybe less if there's a lot of layers going on. If you look at the bottom here in the timeline section, you'll see our text layer. If you click on the layer, it also shows that it's selected on the composition. See how you have these little red squares? And you also, on the layer, you also have all of these little options. It looks a little daunting, but for now, let's just leave everything alone. You do not need many of these options. Okay, let's look over all the way to the left. You have this eye icon. Let's click on it. Did you notice that? The layer disappears from the slide. You can also click on it again to have it show. In the timeline, you see this bar here. This tells you how long this text or this layer is going to stay on the screen on your timeline. For now, you can see that this layer stays on the screen for a minute. Yours may be a little different. If you want to shorten how long this layer is going to stay on for, you move the current time indicator right above this thing here. And for example, we want to stop it at around 10 seconds. What you want to do is hold Alt and the right bracket. And you notice that the layer cuts off after around 10 seconds or right before 10 seconds. And if you scrub the timeline, you can tell right after 10 seconds or around 10 seconds, the text tool disappears. You can also hold the end of this layer and drag it. So for example, if we want it to show up for 15 seconds, you can grab it, drag it around to 15 and let go. Now, if you want to preview what the video looks like, we can go to the preview section on the right, then click the preview button. Well, before we preview, we don't want it to preview for 15 seconds. Let's drag this text tool to maybe like 3 seconds. Maybe 3 seconds, and then preview. Great. You notice after 3 seconds, the text tool disappears. One thing when you're previewing is you want to make sure that this bar here, this thing is called your work area. You want to make sure that your work area covers the section that you want to preview. For example, if your work area was here, when you preview, it's not going to show the video from the beginning. So drag it all the way to the beginning. You can also drag the end closer so that when you preview, it only previews that particular section. It will just loop and repeat. Now let's try to import some images into After Effects. Let's look for some images online. So go to flaticon.com. This is a great resource that I use all the time for icons and when I build my e-learning. It's free. If you're using the free account, you just need to provide attribution. For me, I subscribe, which is relatively cheap, and you don't need to provide attribution. Let's just randomly search for something. I'm just gonna search for funny and scroll down. Let's click on it. Click the PNG button. Go to the free download. It's gonna save to your computer. Okay, I recommend moving your image to a specific folder in the same directory as your After Effects folder. For example, mine would be here under the assets folder, and I moved it from the download section to this directory. Now that we have an image, let's import it to After Effects. What you want to do is go to File, Import, and File. Then find the image or file that you want to import. For me, it is in the assets folder. I'm going to click on this one and I'm going to click import. Now you can see the imported file. It is here in your project panel. To put it on your composition, what you can do is drag it into the timeline or to the composition and let go. Another thing, you can also import your image by just dragging it to your project panel as well. That's another option. Okay, now let's move it around. Let's hold the corner, drag it. I'm gonna hold shift so that it scales proportionally. Let's move it a little bit to the top. Let's move the text tool to the bottom. Move this a little bit. Now if you go to the timeline, you can see how it behaves. First you have the text tool, then your image pops up. If you want both of your images at the same time, just drag this layer here, drag it out. You can drag it out all the way to the beginning, and now it's going to show up the moment the video starts. Okay, and then here you can see that the text tool disappears first, and while the image stays on all the way till 1 minute. If you want to preview, go to the preview panel and click on preview. If you also need to zoom in and zoom out of your composition panel or section, just use your mouse wheel and go, scroll down or scroll up. Alright, I think this is good enough information for basic introduction to the interface for instructional designers who are going to use After Effects. Again, there are so many features to After Effects, but for e-learning development and for instructional designers, we don't need to know all of them.